course, I've told the story many times, but it's always kind of uplifting and, reminds me. And even as I start to think about it, I connect into the spirit in a really nice way. So I was live on the East Coast of the United States, and I've lived here most of my life, but I've lived a few other places. So when my near-death experience happened, I was actually living in Colorado, and I came back east to visit my parents. My roommate in Colorado was a high school friend of mine, so both our parents lived in New York, just about 20 miles north of New York City. And we heard about a party, and we wanted to go from a friend from high school. And we went to the party. We drove back from Colorado in his car, and we both went to our parents' house to rest for a while before the party. And I took my mom's car to the party. At the party, there was a cute young lady who was having the party who I wanted to talk to. So I came up with a plan that I would pretend I was higher than I was. I mean, we were drinking and smoking pot, definitely, and it was a different time where people didn't think twice about driving like that.
Right.
But I thought I
70s?
could... Yeah, yes, in the 1970s, yeah. And so I had him drive me back home so I could go back there the next day and pick up my car and talk to the young lady, because she was kind of busy hosting the party. Almost back to my parents, I realized my sister needed to use my mom's car the next morning for work. So I said to my friend, "Oh, take me back. I got to get the car." And then I remember I went inside to tell the young lady that I was going to take my car. And I still have a vision of leaving the party. And, I realize now if I was I don't drink at all, so it's not an issue, but if I was this age and was that drunk, I would have known not to drive, because I still remember seeing everyone. They were kind of hazy, and the extra bright colors that you see sometimes when you drink a little too much. And I don't remember getting in the car. I don't remember driving at all. The next thing I remember is I'm out of my car, out of my body, floating above the car. The car smashed. Really smashed. Like when I looked, I didn't think of this then, but I had a picture actually of the car that I can't find. When I look at it, wow, how did I survive? And I was sitting on the ground leaning against a tree like this, and there was a police officer crouching over me. Part of it was I saw my head cracked open, and knowing that I was not in good shape, it didn't bother me. It seemed like everything was normal. And so I was facing this way. Where I was, it was all white around me. Where my body was in the car, it was dark. It was, like in the middle of the night. Behind me, even though I wasn't looking that way, I knew it was all white. Then there was a big circle of white that was a different shade of white, and then a white being in there that was kind of radiating light. My experience was very kinesthetic, where I just felt like, just this greatest love. And as I said, even seeing my body my head cracked open, it seemed everything made sense. I remember thinking of just knowing family dilemmas were okay. Everything just was okay, and I knew that. And then the voice from behind me said, "You have to go back. Your father wants you to stay." I knew right at that time he was talking about God, my father, not my physical father. And I went back into my body and came to 3 days later. Yeah, someone asked me recently, did it take a while to remember? But I would say no. I'm trying to think back. So at that time, it wasn't like I thought, oh, I had a near-death experience. It was,
right.
I had no idea. No one was talking about it. Around that time, the phrase near-death experience, someone coined that phrase around that time. But I did not think of it at all. It's not like I knew what to think of it, but I knew I had this experience. Part of how I, had it make sense in my mind happened a little while later. But I did notice after that right away, my hands became warm when I touched people. Again, I didn't know what to make of it. I was always kind of intuitive, but that seemed to increase quite a lot. Another thing that definitely happened is shortly after that, my mom convinced me and bribed me to move back east from Colorado. And I just started meeting all sorts of spiritual people. Most of them, almost all of them had near-death experiences. And so that was a environment where I could talk about it and start learning, but I started studying death. One of the cool things that happened, and I knew this happened, but I didn't realize how cool it really was, is this in my apartment, back in New York, someone knocked on the door, and nowadays if someone knocks without me knowing because of cell phones, I think it's like, what's going on? But someone knocked on the door, I answered the door, there was this beautiful woman there. She said, I'm the sister of a really good friend of yours, and she told me some things about you, and I wanted to get to know you. And she introduced me to the first, I guess, real, authentic spiritual teacher that I met. And just that she showed up at the door, without me doing anything. It just like, and things like that have happened in my life since, just making sure I'm staying on my spiritual path, basically. She introduced me to this guy who is a Sufi sheikh, which is part of the Islamic religion, and the Mevlevi dervishes, who follows the teachings of Jalaluddin Rumi, Rumi's become a famous poet, that people read his. So his love poems were really mostly about either God or his teacher, Shams Tabriz. And, people read them now and put a romantic twist on them, but really they were spiritual, God's love and his spiritual teacher's love. So the sheikh started to talk to me about a couple of things that, that's what I experienced, because I didn't know how to explain it. He talked about the ocean of divine love and benevolence. And I thought, that is what I felt, like the love and just that everything was okay. That was a way to describe it. He talked about Mary and Jesus. He talked about Mary's love for God, how that opened her up to receive the Christ energy. And I thought, wow, that was how I felt, that love for God and receiving that energy. And then he talked about Jesus, and just as soon as he mentioned that, I go, that behind me, that white light being was Jesus telling me I have to go back. And still to this day, those words ring very true to me and really stir my heart and all sorts of things. It's really great. I don't know if you can see it, but I have a scar that goes here, and I say sometimes if I was a woman it would really stand out, but for men it's kind of, but it itches along here. There's tender points, so that my head was cracked open basically. And my dad came in when I was lying on the table. He said he saw and he could see into my head. I guess the skin was folded back when he did that. The doctors didn't tell me that much, really. The neurologist, after I was recovered enough to get out of bed and I was about to go home, I had a meeting and we were standing in a circle with my dad here. The neurologist was right next to me and my mom was here. And, I don't remember what we talked about, but as the neurologist was leaving, his face became very close to me and he had this smirk on his face like, you are lucky. That's what he said. And knowing, and he even, he did a good job because you can't see the scar that much, just right. That I lived. And one of the nurses said to me, it was touch and go for a while. I, asked my dad, it's many years later, but I asked him, did he get any information? He said no. And in those days, doctors didn't really give you much information. They felt it was better to keep the family away and not tell them too much so they don't start freaking out and stuff.